In modern offices, paperwork flows endlessly, swallowing names and faces until there is nothing left but numbers. But what happens when a man spends 14 years inside such a system, slowly losing the sense of who he is? Franz Kafka, born a minority in Prague, became the silent witness to a world where order replaces meaning and punishment arrives without reason. His stories aren't just nightmares, they are warnings, eerily familiar to anyone who has ever felt invisible at their own desk. To understand how a quiet clerk came to map out an entire world of anxiety and alienation, we have to start with the facts of his life. Franz Kafka was born in Prague in 1883, at a time when the city was a crossroads of languages and loyalties. He grew up in a German-speaking Jewish family, a small minority in a city where Czech voices dominated the streets and government decrees arrived in several tongues. This sense of being on the margins was never far from him. The world around Kafka was ruled by forms, permits, and official stamps, each one a reminder of how easily a person could vanish into the background of their own life. Kafka's parents expected him to find security and order, and so he enrolled at the German Charles University. He studied law, a field that promised stability but also demanded obedience to rules that often seemed detached from any human purpose. He moved through years of lectures, examinations, and case studies, learning to navigate the logic of statutes and procedures. In 1906, he earned his doctorate in law, a degree that opened the doors to the civil service and the world of paperwork that would shape his imagination. The census records from this period show a city divided by language and religion, with Kafka's community occupying a narrow space between the Czech majority and the German-speaking elite. The legal profession, too, was a world of boundaries where every step was measured, every mistake recorded, and every success quickly buried under the next pile of documents. Kafka's early years set him on a path where identity was fragile and recognition always provisional, laying the groundwork for a life spent inside systems that promised order but delivered uncertainty. Each morning, Franz Kafka arrived at the Workers' Accident Insurance Institute in Prague, the same building, the same corridors, the same desk. For 14 years, from 1908 to 1922, he worked as a clerk, his name stamped on forms that recorded the injuries and accidents of factory workers across Bohemia. The Institute's routines were precise and unyielding, stacks of claims to process, circulars to draft, ledgers to balance. Every report demanded accuracy, every signature turned a person's life into a case number. Kafka's handwriting appears on preventive bulletins and accident assessments, each document stripped of emotion, reduced to legal phrases and official stamps. The office was a world of silence, broken only by the shuffle of papers and the ticking of the wall clock. Workers filed in with injuries. Kafka weighed their claims against regulations, searching for fault or compliance. The language of the Institute, liability, compensation, preventive measures, became the language of his imagination. The system cared little for names or stories. It cared for order, for process, for the illusion that risk could be measured and suffering contained. Kafka never rose beyond senior secretary. Advancement depended on the same logic as the forms he processed: impersonal, indifferent, and often incomprehensible. His friend Max Brod, who would later preserve Kafka's manuscripts, sometimes visited him at his desk. Brod saw a man trapped by duty, his creativity pressed between the pages of insurance files. As Kafka's health declined, the routines continued. Tuberculosis crept in, but the paperwork did not slow. By the time of his death in 1924, the Institute's ledgers bore little trace of the man who had signed them, only the order he had served. As Gregor Samsa awoke one morning from uneasy dreams, he found himself transformed in his bed into a gigantic insect. The sentence arrives without warning. as blunt and unyielding as a verdict. In that instant, Gregor's body is no longer his own. His arms, now countless legs, thrash against the bedsheets. He tries to speak, but only a faint, animal sound escapes. The world that once recognized him, a son, a brother, a traveling salesman, now recoils in silent confusion. Gregor's first thoughts are not of horror, but of work. The alarm clock is ticking. The train will not wait. He worries about missing his shift, about disappointing his manager, about the family's debts piling up. Even as his body betrays him, the demands of the office persist. His transformation is not a liberation, but another entry in the ledger of obligations. The door to his room remains closed, a thin border between his new shape and the expectations pressing in from the hallway. His parents and sister call his name, but each plea is muffled by the wood and by the growing sense that Gregor is already lost to them. Inside the Samsa apartment, routine holds everything together. Rent is due. Breakfast must be served. The father's uniform hangs by the door, a reminder of jobs lost and found. Gregor's income is the foundation on which the family stands. Now, with him trapped in his room, that foundation cracks. The family's voices shift from concern to impatience, from worry to blame. Gregor can hear them weighing his worth, measuring his absence against the cost of survival. His own needs vanish beneath the paperwork of daily life. In the metamorphosis, the transformation is not just physical, it is the slow erasure of identity by the machinery of duty and expectation. Gregor's body becomes a case file, strange, inconvenient, to be managed or ignored. The world outside his door continues, indifferent to his suffering. Within these walls, the boundary between person and burden dissolves. What remains is not a man, but a problem to be solved, a responsibility to be reassigned. Kafka's story, published in 1915, is not a fantasy. It is a record of what happens when the self is reduced to paperwork, when the human is lost inside the system. The warning is bleak. Meaning disappears not through chaos, but through order taken too far. Someone must have been telling lies about Joseph K., for without having done anything wrong, he was arrested one fine morning. The opening line of the trial lands without warning, as if the machinery of accusation has always been running in the background, waiting for its next subject. Joseph K. is not shown a warrant, nor told the nature of his crime. The officials who arrive are polite but unyielding, their authority absolute and unexplained. The process has begun, and there is no way to step outside it. K moves through a world of summonses and hearings, each one more bewildering than the last. The court is everywhere and nowhere, a labyrinth of rooms, corridors, and silent watchers. He is told he may defend himself, but no one can say against what. Each attempt to seek clarity only deepens the confusion. The law in Kafka's world is not a set of rules to be understood, but a fog that swallows meaning. The officials speak in circles, their words empty of guidance. K is left to guess at the logic that governs his fate. In the heart of the trial lies a parable before the law. A man comes to a gate seeking entry to the law. A doorkeeper tells him he cannot enter now. The man waits, year after year, growing old before the gate, hoping for permission that never comes. The doorkeeper finally tells him that no one else could gain admittance here because this entrance was meant only for him, and then the man dies. The story ends, not with revelation, but with the gate closing forever, its purpose never explained. Kafka's vision is not of chaos, but of order so complete that it becomes senseless. The procedures are followed, the forms are filed, but the reason for it all recedes into shadow. Joseph K. is not punished for an act, but for existing within a system that needs no justification. The terror is not in what is done to him, but in how little can be understood or questioned. In the trial, judgment arrives without cause, and the world continues on, indifferent to the fate of the accused. The trial was published in 1925, a year after Kafka's death. Its world of silent corridors and unreadable summonses reflects the administrative reality he knew. The law is everywhere, but its meaning is always out of reach. For Joseph K. and for Kafka, the greatest fear is not guilt, but the impossibility of innocence. K. arrives in the village at the foot of the castle, carrying only a surveyor's certificate and a letter of summons. The castle itself is always present, looming above the rooftops, but its doors remain closed. Each attempt to reach the authorities leads him into new corridors, new offices, new faces repeating the same phrases. The officials are polite, sometimes even friendly, but their answers fold in on themselves. Forms are requested, permissions delayed, messages relayed through endless intermediaries. The castle is both near and unreachable, a structure of fog and paper. K is told his claim is not valid, yet he is permitted to stay. The rules are always shifting, always just out of sight. In this world, authority is not enforced with violence, but with the slow suffocation of possibility. The system does not need to say no, it only needs to keep K waiting, always on the threshold, never allowed to cross. In another place, punishment is stripped of all ceremony. In the penal colony, a condemned man is led to a device known as the harrow. The officer, its caretaker, explains its workings with the pride of an engineer. The machine is designed to inscribe the prisoner's sentence onto his skin, needle by needle, until the meaning of his crime is literally carved into his body. There is no trial, no defense, no appeal. The process is mechanical, precise, and inescapable. The officer speaks of justice as if it were a matter of gears and springs. He believes in the machine's purpose, in the clarity of its ritual, even as its meaning has faded for everyone else. The condemned man does not know his sentence. He is told only to lie down and submit. Both K and the officer move through spaces where the logic of authority is absolute but empty. The castle's barriers are invisible, enforced by nothing more than endless procedures. The penal colony's punishment is visible, but its purpose has become a hollow tradition. In both places, the individual is reduced to a function, an applicant, a body, a case. The system continues, indifferent to understanding or mercy. The only certainty is that the rules will be followed, even when their meaning has vanished. Kafka's worlds are not ruled by chaos, but by an order that has forgotten why it exists. The Castle was published in 1926, 2 years after Kafka's death. In the penal colony appeared in 1919, its machine still whirring in the background of modern life. These stories do not offer escape. They only open the door to rooms where judgment is carried out by silence and punishment by design. In November 1919, Franz Kafka sat at his desk and began to write. Page after page, his typewriter hammered out a letter to his father, Hermann Kafka. The letter stretched to over 100 pages, each line an attempt to explain a lifetime of fear, guilt, and distance. Kafka addressed his father directly. "Dearest father, you asked me recently why I maintain that I am afraid of you." The words are measured, but the pain is close to the surface. He remembered nights as a child, crying for water, and being carried out onto the balcony in his nightshirt, left alone behind a closed door. The lesson, he wrote, was not just about punishment, but about power, about how mercy could feel like a threat, and how love could become a debt that could never be repaid. Hermann Kafka was a towering figure, both physically and in temperament. He demanded discipline, strength, and conformity. Franz, slight and nervous, felt himself shrinking in his father's presence. He wrote, "You were for me the measure of all things." The rules at home were unspoken but absolute. To obey was to lose oneself, to resist was to invite shame. Kafka described a world where every action was weighed, every word subject to judgment. I was continually in disgrace. Either I obeyed your orders, and that was a disgrace, for they applied, after all, only to me. In the letter, Kafka tried to trace the roots of his own uncertainty. Since there was nothing at all I was certain of, since I needed to be provided at every instant with a new confirmation of my existence. The sense of being on trial, of living under a sentence with no clear crime, began not in the courts or the office, but at the family table. The letter was never delivered. Herman reportedly read only a part of it, then set it aside. But the confession remained, a record of private powerlessness that would echo through Kafka's stories. The father's shadow falls across the pages of The Judgment, where a son is condemned by his father's word, and across the world of Gregor Samsa, who wakes to find himself transformed and unrecognizable. The machinery of guilt, once set in motion, runs quietly through every room. Kafka's letter is not just a document of family life, it is a blueprint for the invisible systems that would haunt his fiction. Kafka's world of paperwork and silent corridors was not just a setting, but a method. The procedures he followed at the Workers' Accident Insurance Institute shaped the very structure of his stories. Kafka's daily routine, drafting reports, weighing liability, translating injury into legal language, became the architecture of his fiction. The language of the Institute, with its forms and formulas, found its way into the sentences of his novels. A leading Kafka scholar, Ernst Powell, noted 14 years of following bureaucratic procedures in an institute which was itself part of the wider bureaucratic empire, and of writing official reports in the tone and style of a senior bureaucrat. You'd have to be quite dense not to link these factors with the visions of a vast topless bureaucracy that form the core of the two great novels, and with the parody of official academic bureaucratic style which is so omnipresent, especially in the later stories. Kafka's fiction is built from the same material as his working life: endless procedures, unreadable rules, and the slow erosion of meaning by repetition. The forms he signed at his desk, the circulars he composed, the ledgers he balanced, all of these left their imprint on his imagination. The Institute's language, stripped of names and stories, became the template for the worlds of The Trial in the Castle, where authority is everywhere and understanding is always out of reach. Even as his health failed, after his first lung hemorrhage in 1917, which marked the beginning of tuberculosis, Kafka continued to process claims, draft bulletins, and file reports. The discipline of the office, with its demand for precision and its indifference to suffering, became a kind of training ground for the logic of his prose. Kafka did not invent his systems from fantasy. He copied them line by line from the world he inhabited. The machinery of bureaucracy, once internalized, became the machinery of his fiction. Today, algorithms and automated forms decide more than distant clerks ever could. As order grows, so does the distance between decision and understanding. Kafka's world is no longer just a metaphor. It is a blueprint unfolding in real time. Meaning is not lost through chaos, but through layers of perfect, indifferent logic. The most terrifying maze is the one we build ourselves. Share your thoughts below.